Ja, mange tak, Peter, for den fine introduktion. And I'll shift to English. And also, we are very grateful to be here at Sedermeradagen again. We've been to Sedermeradagen several times, and as Peter mentioned, Sedermer took us public at Aktietorget back in 2014 at a market cap around 50 million Swedish, and then we moved on to Nasdaq small cap last year, so 4 years after we are now there with a market cap around 600 million Swedish. So Saniona is quite different from most of the other companies in the biotech field in that we have a very broad pipeline, and this means that we have a very much reduced risk in our portfolio. And also I can say we have a very high upside potential. And that is due to the broad pipeline. You can see an illustration here of the pipeline with the 4 products in late-stage clinical, Tesomet and Tesomet and 2359. And since we have such a late-stage pipeline, we are also taking much of the risk out of the development in the programs. And another risk-reducing factor is that we have entered into several partnerships that have paid for the clinical development and also have provided funding into our company. We can also say we have a high upside potential because we have many shots on goal simply because of the broad pipeline, and also because some of the products are actually getting very close to the market now. One is the Tesomet product, which is developed in Mexico, and the last clinical studies should be completed this year, filing potentially next year, and a product on the market in 2020. We're also addressing very big market opportunities in very big areas of concern in the world. It's in obesity, in other metabolic diseases, and also in some rare diseases and in addiction. And all of this is with first-in-class products. Some of them are in the orphan disease space. I think many of you know of this area, which means that it's easier to get to the market, it's faster, less a patient, and also when you are on the market, you can actually commercialize with a very small team, and this is actually our plan to do our own commercialization in one of the products. I think it's fair to say that we have really delivered a number of deals over the years. We have execution power, and that's also based on the very strong research team that we have, which has more than 25 years of experience in the area of what we call ion channels, where we are among the best in the world, and which is the basis for all these agreements with the pharma companies. So financially, we have not spent that much money compared to what usually spent in biotech companies, and that's because, as I said, income from all these agreements. And also, we can say we are financially secured until 2020 from a recent financing event. I'll talk a little bit about how strategy has evolved and why we are where we are today. There are some strategic choices in that. We were in the lucky situation that we were born with a very broad pipeline of programs, both research programs, clinical programs, that we acquired from another Danish company. And we decided early on we would make partnerships with some of the programs. We made a deal with Janssen Pharmaceutical, also part of J&J, with Pfizer, with another of the very big companies, Boehringer Ingelheim, that really, as I said, paid some of our research expenses, but also validated our technology platform. Also, we made a deal with a company called Medix in Mexico that are now running our phase 3 studies on the obesity program. And there are other deals on the way. But this enabled us also to focus our own internal resources on some research programs. We activated 6 programs and also put some of them into development. The Tesomet programs, I'll talk more about. And last year, we took the first compound from our ion channel platform in the pain SAN 711 into development. Now, the package of compounds and programs that we had was actually much bigger than that, and we didn't have money for that, so that was done in different ways. We have programs that are financed solely by grants. We have a phase 2 program in addiction running in US, financed by grants in the US, and also we have a program in Parkinson's disease that are fully funded by Michael J. Fox Foundation. We call these free ride programs. In addition to that, we also took some of the programs that didn't fit directly into our core into spin-out companies. So the first one we made was back in 2013. It was Cadent Therapeutics, and that was actually formed in the US, and now has taken their first compound into the clinic, also in an orphan disease space. We have an ownership in that company, and also we have royalties on the product that will come out of that. The next spin-out was Initiator Pharma, that also via Sedermer was listed on Aktietorget, and we gave all our shares away to our shareholders, and I hope you are here today and owning some of these Initiator Pharma shares. The next one is Scandion Oncology, and they will actually present after my presentation of where they are today. Still, they have not been through a major financing round. So this has enabled us to focus on very specific programs. This is where we spend our money and where we think we have the largest potential of value generation. That's in the first priority, the product Tesomet in orphan disease called Prader-Willis, and we want to develop and commercialize this in US and Europe in this indication. The second priority is Tesomet in other diseases, and that's particularly in obesity and other metabolic diseases, including diabetes, liver disease. And there we are focusing primarily on markets outside US and Europe initially, and then later on bring this to this region. The third product, the third priority is tesofensine in Mexico, where I mentioned we are very close to getting it all the way and hope to see sales already in 2020 in Mexico and later in Argentina. So why do we focus on Prader-Willi syndrome, this rare disease, and in the orphan disease space? We see actually a very interesting commercial opportunity there. I can go back to market figures later on. It is a life-threatening disease with a huge medical need, and it has immense effects on the patient, the family, and the society. We think we can go fast to the market because patients are easy to identify with a genetic test. We have clear endpoints, and also we have this orphan drug status possibility. And the investment is not bigger than it should be possible for a small company like ours to do that, to do the final development, to do the commercialization. So this is a busy slide, but it tells a little bit more about this Prader-Willi syndrome. I mentioned it was a genetic disease, so the small children, actually when they're very young, they get some very characteristic symptoms, and one of the worst for them is an incredible urge to eat all the time. So they have no possibility of stopping that. And that is very frustrating for themselves, for their families. It's about 1 out of 15,000 live births, and this means that there are about 15 to 20,000 of these patients in Europe and US, the market that we are interested in. It can be acute, life-threatening, and often these patients don't live very long. The mean is about 30 years or so. And they get also complications of all this overeating because they get fat, and then they get complications like diabetes, cardiac, and so on. And there is no effective treatment today. I mentioned the major economical cost for that indication. We are not the first who is going into this indication, but actually the first company, Safgen, that did phase 2 and phase 3 studies in that indication. They are now out of the game because they lost their product. But they actually showed that it should be possible to do clinical development, and also the analysts that follow Safgen had a very good feeling for that market. So again, assuming that there would be about 15 to 20,000 patients, which would demand about 80 to 150 US$ per patient per year, would give a market in the $1 billion range, which of course is interesting. And there are also other indications in orphan disease space, at least 2 others that we are looking carefully into, where the market potential could be similar. Also, diseases characterized by this hyperphagia, this urge to eat, the craving for food. And one of them is this hypothalamic obesity. So we are in Prader-Willi disease, and we actually started a study last year in adult Prader-Willi patients. It was a small study, only 9 patients, with 6 in the treatment group, 3 in the placebo group. And we looked at for reduction in weight, and we looked in particular for this reduction in hyperphagia on the overeating score, or craving for food score. And there was a very nice effect on the weight, but I think more interesting and appealing is that there was a very dramatic, apparently, loss of this hyperphagia, this craving for food. And that's shown in this picture, where the placebos are marked here in red, and they had a score of around 10 here as the beginning. When they stopped the study, about 3 months later, they had about the same score. They were still craving for food all of the time. Whereas the patients that were treated with Tesomet, they gradually lost their hypophagia, and at visit 9 or visit 14 after 3 months, it was virtually gone. Of course, this is a very small study, and we should be careful about reading too much into it, but this was really astonishing, and this was also what we have heard from all the key opinion leaders we've discussed with. And they urge us to continue in this indication and continue in children, which is the main market for such a product. And we have just received approval for starting such clinical studies in part of the same protocol as the first one. So what we can do with our products is something about craving. It's about addiction, about obsession. And that is a general thing that we all have. We have it in our pleasure center in the brain that's marked in this little red spot here. And we all like to get pushed on that reward center. And sometimes it just gets out of control, and you get these obsession about food, obsession about alcohol, tobacco, or even drugs, or you can even get obsessed by playing your computer and cannot get away from it. We think we can actually control that by this mechanism, by the tesofensine, Tesomet, and 2359 products, because we stimulate very slightly in that reward center and for a very long time. So this is the basis of our 3 products, tesofensine, which we are developing in Mexico for obesity, and the 2359, which we are developing for cocaine addiction in the US, as I mentioned. I will talk a little bit more about the obesity part of it, because this is, of course, also a very, very interesting opportunity. And it's a major global burden, as you all know. Actually, this is a report from McKinsey made a few years back, pointing out the 4 biggest problems in the world from an economical point of view. And that's the smoking, that's the violence, armed violence, and then comes obesity, almost as big, and then comes alcohol. So actually 3 of these 4 major problems are involving craving, and this makes it very interesting for us to point at these, and particularly obesity is a focus for us. And the reason why we picked Mexico as our first entrance into that is that Mexico is perhaps the worst or the next worst obesity country in the world. In general, there is about 1/3 of people in the whole world that are obese or overweight. In Mexico, it's 7 out of 10. And if you talk about children and women, it's the highest in the world. And that also means that there is a lot of association with this obesity and the consequences in diabetes and so on that actually makes this the most problematic area. I think it says here, I cannot read it, 8 out of 10 deaths are caused by chronic non-transmitted diseases linked to overweight or obesity. So if you just look at this illustration, there are about 129 million in Mexico. 90 million of those are obese, and only 1 million are treated today. So there is a huge potential for getting more of these people out of their obesity and getting more treatment there. And we choose a player there which is very important, clearly the key player in Mexico, and that's a company called Medix that's only working in obesity, have been there for 30 years or more, and they have their own product pipeline and products on the market, but it's very old products and not very effective products. They have about 50% of the market, which is actually quite substantial. $250 million is the market. And you can see Novo Nordisk, for instance, is really, really small there, 3%. So we partnered up with Medix there, and they have the rights to the tesofensine product in Mexico. They're doing all the clinical studies, paying for everything, and we will have royalties on that, double-digit royalties, and reserve the rights to the data for the rest of the world. So the study that they're doing, it's about 400 patients. All patients have been enrolled, and as I mentioned, the study will be completed this year, and we are really looking forward to see that. They're looking mainly for loss in weight. And the reason why we believe that this should work is that a similar study has already been made a few years back in Denmark, actually, where there was 3 different doses of tesofensine tested towards placebo. And you can see the 3 different doses with the highest effect of 12.6 at the highest dose. But at the mean dose, which we consider the therapeutic dose, about 11.2% of weight loss, which was really dramatic, and this was published in The Lancet as a really game player, a changer in this field. If you subtract placebo 2 kilogram, it's 9.2% of weight loss, and that can be compared to other drugs on the market, which in general will only give 2 to 6% of weight loss, even after 1 to 2 years of treatment, and this study was just half a year of treatment. Actually, if the study is continued for another 6 months in an open label fashion, you saw a weight loss of 14%. Now it's not placebo control, I should say, but still a dramatic weight loss. So I think it's fair to say that we have reduced the risk in this program very considerably, both in tesofensine and also in the next product I'll talk about, the Tesomet product. And that is, of course, what everybody is talking about in our industry. It's easy enough to say huge market figures, but also we know there's a huge risk in biotech. You can lose a compound in clinical studies, in talks and so on, but we have been through most of that with the tesofensine Tesomet product. We know there is this extraordinary weight loss, not only in obese patients, but actually also in pre-diabetics and diabetic patients. We know that it's very well tolerated. We know there's a full tox package going all the way to the market. More than 700 patients or volunteers have been treated with tesofensine and have been tolerated, as I said, very well. The only thing that has been noticed is an increase in heart rate, so the pulse goes up a little. And that's the reason why we also wanted to develop a product that was completely cardiovascular neutral, and we called that product Tesomet. So Tesomet is a combination with what we call a beta blocker that simply takes away this effect on the blood, on the heart rate. And we have done studies both in animals, in man, that has demonstrated this is the case, and also in diabetic patients. And also based on this, we have a completely new patent estate on the Tesomet product. So this is where we invest our money on Tesomet, the combination of tesofensine and metoprolol. And as I said, we are now spending our own resources in the eating disorder field, in Prader-Willi, in hypothalamic obesity, and other eating disorders. But the area of metabolic disease, of obesity, diabetes, is also, of course, extremely interesting, but also very big and very complicated for us. So the way we will go about this is to start outside Europe and US. And we're already taking the first step in Mexico, where our partner Medix will also develop this Tesomet product in a special obesity field. But we can see many other good market opportunities in Latin America, in Korea, in Arab countries, in Russia, Japan, many other places where there should be a relatively straightforward way to the regulatory approval and to the market, like we see in Mexico. In Europe and US, it's much, much bigger studies that we need. And also when we do this, separate the two markets and the two indications, we should not see cannibalism of the Prader-Willi product, which is of course a high price product with a small number of patients, and the big markets in obesity, where we will have a much lower price than in Prader-Willi. So this is where we are now. We are doing phase 2 studies in Prader-Willi and ready next year to go into the bigger studies leading towards the market. And this is, as I said, something we can do ourselves. For the general Tesomet development package, we needed to do a lot of other studies, make a new tablet with the combination, see that a tablet works, and so on. And this is listed in this box with some of the green bars. Many of these studies have been done or close to be finished, so we can hack those off. And this will enable us next year to do big studies on Tesomet in obesity and other indications. So Saniona is not just these Craving products. That's the late-stage products, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. What we really are proud of is our research pipeline in the ion channel field, where we are doing a number of first-in-class products and also have a number of prestigious partnerships. I mentioned the Cadent therapeutic program, which just went into man in a field called ataxia, also a neurological disease. We have the compound SAN711, which is a completely new treatment modality in pain, where you'll not have the tolerance development as you have with morphine, that you need to give higher and higher doses, and also it's much better tolerated. We have a collaboration with Boehringer Ingelheim in schizophrenia, and we are hoping for a milestone within a foreseeable future. And also we plan to select a compound in our IK channel program in inflammatory bowel disease pretty soon. We have other partnerships with a UK company called Benevolent, and we have this partnerships with Michael J. Fox in the Parkinson's disease field. And this is, of course, what we see as the long-term potential growth in the company. But in the meanwhile, it has also paid, this research has paid for many of our clinical costs because we get these milestone payments, upfront payments, and payments for our research by our partners. So the financing, just to illustrate that we have been able to make income every year, and some years bigger than others because of these milestone or upfront payments, but it has contributed very much to a relatively low burn rate, although we have a big pipeline. We have not that much money in the bank now, but on top of that, we actually just provided by the end of last year a new financing of 144 million Swedish. We've spent 24 of these already, and that's an arrangement with a company called Nice and Green, where we can actually take out 6 million kroner every month, and then they can convert as they please later. It's for us a very easy way to get the capital when we need it at a very, very reasonable cost. So there will be a number of inflection points over the next 12 months. How I'm doing on time, Peter? 2
more minutes.
That's fine. Of course, with Tesomet, with tesofensine, we are very much looking forward to the completion of these phase 3 studies, the final clinical studies. We are looking at completing all these base packets on the Tesomet and be ready to start the new studies. And also, we see an interim analysis on the cocaine addiction study coming later this year. We believe that Cadent will complete their phase 1 and potentially go into phase 2 pretty soon, and we will go into the clinic with our pain compound. Also, we see progress in our development, in our research programs, and potential milestones out of that from our partners. And we could always imagine that there would be new spin-outs, new collaborations coming out of this broad pipeline. So, in summary, we have a very straightforward plan to go to the market with tesofensine in Mexico and get royalties out of that. Also to go specifically with our own resources into the Prader-Willi syndrome, go all the way. And also we have a number of additional value drivers in the partnerships and in the spin-out companies. And with the milestones coming up, and we have had a really, really hectic news flow actually since we got listed on Aktietorget. This will continue because of the broad pipeline. So we have been very happy with the development of the company over the past years and see a very bright future for us. And we are happy for those of you that actually joined us when we went at Aktietorget, and hope you are still around. We have about 3,000 shareholders in Sweden, 2,000 in Denmark, and we are of course also hoping that new investors will look into our company. Thank you very much for your attention.
Tack så mycket, Jörgen. Jag har en fråga.
Ja.
Du nämnde här att ni har valt att dela ut Scandion Oncology.
Did I say that? That was not the intention.
No. Kan du vara lite mer specifik hur ni har agerat med Scandion Oncology?
What I should have mentioned was that with Initiator Pharma, we split out our shares to our shareholders. With Scandion Oncology, we have not decided yet what we want to do, but they are in the initial phases of, we brought out the program into their company. They're developing on that, and we've not had a major finance round in that company yet.
Okay, good. So you made it clear to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Jörgen? No? Okay. Tack för att du kom hit. Thank you very much. Tack.
Tack idag.